let's talk about something that so many families think about, often in quiet conversations, sometimes in moments of hope or even anxiety. We're talking about that deep, deep desire to choose whether you have a son or a daughter. And today, we're going to go on an incredible journey from old family stories all the way to the most advanced science to understand how this has become a real choice people can make.
May God compensate you with a boy. How many of you have heard that phrase, or something just like it? It's said at celebrations after the birth of a beautiful, healthy baby girl. And while it's often met with kindness, for many it carries a heavy, heavy weight. It can turn a moment of joy into a moment of pressure. And that pressure, well, that's the real starting point for a whole conversation today.
So here's our roadmap for today. First, we're going to unpack that great obsession, the social pressure we just talked about. Then, we'll have a little fun looking at what I call grandma's recipes. After that, we'll get into a very simple science lesson. From there, we'll explore the incredible high-tech solution that changed everything. And that, of course, leads us to the great debate, the huge ethical questions. And finally, we'll talk about the final choice.
Right, so before we touch any of the science, any of the technology, we have to understand the why. Why is this desire to have a son in particular so powerful for so many people? It's not always just a simple preference. More often than not, it's about intense, sometimes overwhelming social and family pressure.
You know, this isn't just a theory. This is a real person's life. This quote is from a woman named Zena, and her words, wow, they just hit you, don't they? She just had her second beautiful, healthy daughter, but instead of just pure celebration, she was met with this feeling of pity. That pressure from her husband's family was so strong that she eventually went through IVF, not because she couldn't have children, but specifically to have sons. Think about that.
Zena's story is the perfect window into a much, much bigger reality. This pressure to carry on the family name, to have a male heir, it's a powerful force in many parts of the world. And that drive, that feeling of duty, is what pushes people to look for any solution, any advantage they can find. It starts with folklore and ends with a science lab.
And that brings us to one of my favorite parts, Grandma's recipes. You know what I'm talking about. Long before we had microscopes and genetic testing, people had, well, they had theories. They had all sorts of creative ideas for how to tip the scales and get the boy or girl they wanted. Let's look at a few of the most popular ones.
Come on, you've heard some of these, right? The idea that if the mother eats certain foods, maybe more acidic, maybe spicier, it can influence the gender. Or how about the ancient Chinese lunar calendar? People still swear by it. Then there are the really complex timing methods, all based on when you have intercourse relative to ovulation. And of course, the classic old wives' tale. If the baby is sitting on the left side, it's a girl. On the right, it's a boy.
So, after centuries of trying these methods, what does modern, 21st century science have to say about them? The answer is pretty brutal, actually. There is absolutely zero, none, zilch scientific evidence that any of them work. When it comes to picking a gender, relying on these methods is literally no better than flipping a coin. It's 50-50.
Okay, so if it's not the spicy food, and it's not some ancient calendar, then what is it? Who or what is actually in charge of this decision? To understand that, we need a really quick, really simple science lesson. Don't worry, no advanced degrees needed here. It all comes down to these things called chromosomes. Okay, so what is a chromosome? The easiest way to think about it is like this. It's the biological instruction manual that's tucked inside every single cell in your body. It tells your body how to build you. Now, humans have 23 pairs of these manuals, but there's one very special pair called the sex chromosomes that has one specific job, determining biological sex.
And here it is. This is the absolute key to everything. It all comes down to what the mother and the father each contribute. The mother's egg, it always carries an X chromosome. No exceptions, it's always an X. The father, on the other hand, is the variable. His sperm can carry either an X chromosome or a Y chromosome.
So the biology here is just simple math. If a sperm that's carrying an X chromosome reaches the egg first, you get X plus X, which equals XX, and that's a girl. But if a sperm carrying a Y chromosome wins the race, you get Y plus X, which equals XY, and that's a boy. It's a 50-50 race every single time.
So the final, inescapable scientific conclusion is this. It is the man's sperm, and only the sperm, that is responsible for determining the gender of the baby. The mother provides the constant X, and the father's sperm provides the deciding factor, either another X for a girl or the Y for a boy.
All that pressure that's put on women for centuries, it was completely misplaced.
For pretty much all of human history, that 50-50 chance was the end of the story. It was up to fate, up to God's will. But then, technology arrived. And it didn't just tip the scales, it completely changed the game. We're talking about something called in vitro fertilization, or IVF, combined it with a truly revolutionary technique.
This game-changing technology is called PGD. That stands for Pre-implantation Genetic Diagnosis. Now, its original purpose was incredibly noble. It was developed to screen tiny embryos for devastating genetic diseases before they were transferred to the mother. But doctors very quickly realized it could do something else. It could clearly identify the sex chromosomes, XX or XY, with almost perfect accuracy.
So, how does this actually work? Let's break it down. First, through IVF, eggs are fertilized in a lab, creating several embryos. These tiny embryos are then allowed to grow for about 3 to 5 days. Then comes the amazing part. A single cell is so carefully removed from each embryo. That one cell is then tested, its chromosomes are analyzed to check for genetic health, and of course, to see if it's XX or XY. And then the final step. Only the healthy embryos of the gender the parents have chosen are transferred into the mother's womb to grow.
So, does it work? Oh yeah, it works. The effectiveness is just mind-blowing. If the IVF is successful and leads to a pregnancy, the success rate of PGD in giving you the gender you chose is over 99%. This isn't a hope or a theory anymore. This is science offering a definitive choice. It's a total game changer.
So science has handed us this power, the ability to make a choice that was once only in the hands of the Creator. And this, right here, is where the conversation gets incredibly difficult and incredibly important. Just because we can do this, what are the consequences? What are the ethical, the social, the religious lines we have to consider? Take a moment to really read this quote from Dr. Abir Dababana. She calls it a form of female infanticide in a modern style. Those words are chilling. She's referring to the horrific pre-Islamic practice of burying infant daughters alive, and her argument is that by choosing not to implant perfectly healthy female embryos just because they are female, we are essentially committing a high-tech version of the same act, denying a female her right to even exist. A powerful and deeply unsettling argument. And this isn't just some far-off philosophical fear. Look at this data. This is real-world information from Jordan. Right now, for children up to age 15, there are already 106 boys for every 100 girls. Now, that might not sound like a huge difference, but when you scale it across a whole society, it's a significant imbalance. Experts see this as a warning sign. What happens to a society when there are far more men than women? The social consequences could be huge. So, what does faith say? Specifically within Islamic law, or fiqh, is this allowed? Well, the answer is incredibly nuanced. It's not a simple yes or no. It all comes down to the reason, the niyyah. As you can see, if it's for a medical reason, like preventing a disease that only affects boys, it's generally seen as permissible. If a couple is already going through the difficult process of IVF anyway, it's also often allowed. The big debate starts with family balancing. Say a couple has 3 girls and wants a boy. Some scholars say it's okay, others strongly disagree. But for using this technology just for social preference, especially for a first child, that's almost universally considered forbidden, or hora.
And all of this brings us to the very heart of the matter. Science has given us an incredible, almost unbelievable power, a choice. But with great power comes even greater responsibility. We now have to ask ourselves, what is the right path forward? What is the wise thing to do?
I want to end with one last story. It's about a man named Ibrahim. Like Zena, he had 3 daughters and felt that same intense social pressure to have a son. He and his wife tried IVF twice to have a boy, and both times it failed. It must have been heartbreaking. But after that, God blessed them naturally with 2 more daughters, and today he is the proud, happy father of 5 girls. And he says that pressure that felt so heavy, it just doesn't affect him anymore. He found his happiness not in getting what society wanted, but in accepting the beautiful gifts he was given. And that really is the question we're all left with. The technology exists. It puts the choice right in our hands, where once there was only chance and prayer. But our society, our ethics, our faith, they all ask us to pause and consider a much, much bigger question. Just because we have the ability to do something, does that automatically mean that we should? The science is clear, but the right path forward, that is for each of us to reflect on.